Okay, so good evening, everyone. My name is Sherlina Nageer, and I'm here with Quincy Mc Ewan, otherwise known as Gulliver, and Kiara Ann from the Guyana Trans United. And we are here on the eve of International Transgender Day of Visibility, which is tomorrow, March 31st. And we're here to talk about transgender life in Guyana and some of the successes, some of the challenges, and the reality of life for transgender persons in Guyana. So, Gulliver, let's start by reflecting a little bit. Transgender Guyanese now have constitutional rights, right? This was a very significant court ruling that 7 years ago in 2018, November of 2018, a court case that you were involved with. You were one of the litigants.
Yes.
This went all the way to the CCJ, the Caribbean Court of Justice, which is the highest regional court for the region. And the verdict was unanimous that the constitution of the current constitution of Guyana at that time was discriminatory towards transgender individuals, and it struck down a clause of the constitution. And so now you want to say, tell us a little bit more, refresh our memories for those of us who maybe were too young or don't remember. I mean, 2018 was 7 years ago, so we might have forgotten some of the details about that.
So what about this particular law? It was not basic directly for trans, but it was this kind of arcade law that we from in our constitution that we inherit from the Britain, and those was called under a group of laws that called the Saving Clause, and there were some specific laws under those Saving Clause, like for a man to dress in consume female attire and male attire, meaning that any male should be subjected to trousers and women should be dressed in skirt. And if for a reason that a man should wear a dress, then it deemed improper purpose, and then you could have been come in conflict. It's not much about directly to your everyday life, but most about your attire. And we find what has happened because of trans person and the gender expression and gender identity. This law was mostly affected the trans population than any other Guyanese, because we know from day one women are free to wear trousers, and some male do it for theater performance and they were allowed to wear it, but outside of all society and strata, this particular law was a conflict to trans person directly to say.
Right. So, I mean, some people listening to this might be chuckling and thinking, clothes are clothes, you know, clothes don't have gender. And it's really, like you said, it's how part of the expression, right? So we have the freedom of expression, and clothes are one way that we express ourselves, our individuality, and especially for transgender individuals, that is very important. So the fact that this law was repealed by the CCJ right? That's what happened?
Yes, when we went in 2009, myself and seven other trans women was being picked up. But there were a lot of crackdown before then, before 2009. It, but 2009 was a very significant time for me and the particular law, because what we find, we were great in numbers. And because of the fact that was 7 of us was being picked up, we decided to take it as a challenge to the constitutional challenge. So it started, the case was being heard for the first time in 2010, a year. It take like a whole year for the lawyers to file this document. However, in 2010, we had the first court hearing. We had several hearings all the way up. So we went after then to the Court of Appeal, then on to the CCJ. As you alluded, in 2018, it was being, the laws, the judges at the time find that this particular law, even though it was in the book, there was only one group of persons, for instance, the trans population, was being criminalized under this law. So because of that, they went and repealed the laws, struck it out in fact, and then we get 2 years after, it was then removed from our constitutional book.
Okay, so the government of Guyana actually followed the ruling of the CCJ
Yes.
directive and got rid of this law. So that's something that we can count as a success.
Yes.
Right? So Kiara, to bring you into the conversation, you might have been a little young at that time, but knowing that this law is no longer on the books, I'm very sorry, knowing that this law is no longer on the books, have you felt a positive difference in your life?
Well, I must say kudos to Gulliver and the other person who fought the fight during that time, because before that came out, I was kind of scared. Well, I was actually indoor, I should say, like doing a little undercover dress code and stuff like that, dressing as a person other than assigned to birth. So after that came out, I started, one at a time, because I said to myself, okay, I'm comfortable now, and have persons who I can depend on, brace on, get advice and make me feel more welcome. So
that made you feel more free to express yourself.
Definitely.
Right. So this is the interesting thing about laws, because sometimes we have laws and they're not enforced, and they don't really change anything. The conditions still apply. But some laws actually do help change hearts and minds.
Yes.
So it's like a top-down approach. But maybe we could talk a little bit more about some of the grassroots work that is also needed, and that GTU, Guyana Trans United, has been doing over the years to help change, let's say, hearts and minds of the general Guyanese public.
So, Sherlina, even though, as I also would go back to said, it's indeed a magical night. Because one, we were a community, perhaps didn't used to identify. It helped us at that particular time after then to be able to identify to be a trans woman. It also allowed us to start a movement. And starting the movement is when we were able to send and branch off into an organization. Actually, over a decade, it's about 12-year-old, and there's a Guyana Trans United born. And we do a lot of groundwork in terms of for our community. We do a lot of work outside even to our community. We raise our voice when women are being abused and so forth. We stand up with other civil society organizations. We demand government to look about vulnerable groups. We advocate largely on minority women groups and women's stories. We advocate across the board, not just because of trans and transgender rights, but we as a civil society organization, we believe there is always a place in society for civil society movement, no matter how small or large, but we continue to help to change and to empower civil communities that find themselves in vulnerable spaces.
Yes, this is one thing, Gal, you and I have stood side by side on so many issues, on a range of issues over the years. And this is a key point because, like you said, right, transgender persons are not, you're part of a wider society.
Sure.
And everything is connected. This is the whole concept of intersectionality, right? So when you're, I might not be part of this particular community, but when my rights are violated, when your rights are violated, they affect each other, right? And so this is why solidarity is important, and we need to support each other. And this is part of, again, the visibility. When people see that you transgender persons support, let's say, child abuse victims, right? Or you're calling for justice for persons who have experienced gender-based violence, economic violence, you know, all kinds of violence, then we see that the community cares not just about themselves, but about other issues, and that helps. I think people understand, who might have kind of a stereotypical view of what transgender persons care about. You see, actually, no, we care about all kinds of things.
But one of the things is that, Sherlina, is that society involved all the time. So before now, transgender women may be always there.
Right.
And we maybe play as society evolved, that different role we take on from time to time. Because for me, growing up, and couldn't identify as a trans woman, but I know person who would have there before me, who would have able to work in the homemaking, domestic work, have to take care of people, children in the community, see them growing up and sending off them to school and such thing. It's only that we have a different culture now, that the social media and people are a little bit more formative in what they do and how they do it, and then we now label and to be called trans, but we're always been there and always in fabric of society. The new norm or the new buzz might come to say trans, but we were always there.
Right.
And just to add what Cliff just said, I also think that why persons were like that years before, I should say, is because persons were scared to come out. Because actually, you doesn't have to dress the way like this to say that, okay, I'm trans. You can be trans, yes, but you can, at the end of the day, you can be scared to come out saying that, okay, if I come out, I'm gonna have a family issue, I might drop out of school, I might lose my job. So that is a barrier as well.
Right. And some people still have these fears.
Yes.
We know that, you know, some persons have very loving and supportive families and networks, and other persons are not as lucky.
Yeah.
We still have a lot of stigma and discrimination, unfortunately. But there's a point that you both were making that I feel like it's important to highlight, which is that Gulf was saying, you know, we have always been here. And gender, as we know it, it's not black and white. And if you look in nature, right, you look in nature, there's so much diversity. And there's a fluidity. So I think the young people nowadays are more, not just young people, but I see more and more people understanding that, you know, there's a spectrum. And it's kind of silly to say, oh, there's only two ways of being. And if you're not one and you're the other, then something's wrong with you. That's, you know, been debunked. We have all the science and so right now. So it's a changing world for the better. But, like you were saying, Kezia, there's still persons who are afraid. So do you want to maybe share a little bit about how Guyana Trans United helps people get to feel more confident, to deal with any challenges that they might face?
So we have a robust program at Guyana Trans United. And some of the program that we have for the years that we have, one of the main thing that we able to keep is our social worker. And because our mental health, as a young trans person coming up, might not know how to deal with our mental health. Sometimes people see us in spaces and they feel that we've been too loud or aggressive. But sometimes because that come from time over time as a young person growing up trying to find your sexuality, there's not much places that you're able to go to get counseling. So you always being suppress your gender expression or your gender identity, and sometimes it comes at a place that even when you assume that you're out and you want it to express in some way or the other, sometimes it comes into conflict with the wider community. So one of the things at Guyana Trans United, we were able to maintain our social work, even though that it's voluntarily work now because of the old cutting of funding. But from 12 years to now, we're proud to have our social work in the house with us. We do a lot of counseling for young person. We do skill building classes. We were successful in able to get, because one of the things that we look at in society that's sometimes a bit, what must say, a better word to put it, that sometimes there's class in society. Assumingly we shouldn't be seen because of class, but there's a factor that if that you're somebody with money or a socioeconomic in power, then you tends to pass and you don't feel the same discrimination like the regular trans person or the regular Guyanese person would feel. And we try to empower person in socioeconomic in power. We're just able to complete 30 trans women to go back and do a classes of their choice and was able to empower them to start some small business.
Lovely, lovely. 30, that's
30.
impressive. You want to share what some of those businesses are in case
So some of those
might
business,
want
some
to
person was
support
able to do cosmetology and he was successful and have the certificate. Some was able to do cake decoration, food and nutrition. Some person would have able to went, also we had person who went to institute to further their studies. We were able to have 2 person graduated from that out of the 30. We had person who further went on to engineering and now have a small business that if you have your car or some part to fix, they're able to provide also those spare parts to get it fixed. So there's a wider course out of the 30 able to achieve and get done.
Very good. So you're going to share GTU's contact information for persons who are watching if they want to get in touch with any and support any transgender person who has one of these businesses. You can call GTU. You guys also have a Facebook page. You want to share any social media?
Well, the Facebook page, it's Guyana Trans United. That's the Facebook page, and when you scroll the Facebook page, you can see all the other information. You can see all the activities that GTU would have been conducted previously, and probably activities that GTU would be conducted probably in the next few months, weeks, year.
Right.
Also, all it said it is Guyana Trans United. If they have vacancy existing, persons can apply. Once you're qualified, you will be hired. It doesn't have to be a trans person, and everything will be on the Facebook page.
Okay, good. So we've talked about some of the positives, the successes, which is a great place to start.
Yes.
But let's talk now about some of the challenges that still exist.
So some of the challenges would be an opportunity to have received funding directly from the government to take on this society work, because by itself it's a quite expensive task, because we don't look to say, okay, although that we might have structure in doing things, sometimes we have a client-centered approach. And that client-centered approach is based on the individual that come before us. So we indeed, for a trans woman, might be different from the service that we give to a female sex worker. Because even though that we start out as a trans-led organization, we realize the vulnerability and intersexuality with all these other groups, so MSM, trans, domestic women who suffer from domestic violence, children being abused, and all these things. So there's always a client-centered approach, and our work is spread across, because a woman who have children who may be a sex worker or just a normal mom might have a different need from a trans woman, or even from a trans sex worker, or even from an MSM. So we have this big client-centered approach, and sometimes very difficult to say all the things that we do, because of the fact that when person come before you, they wanted some way to be feel, some voices to be heard, something to be tangible to leave with, even if just to navigate them from one service to the other service, because we also navigate. There's a group of person that we employ that who collect information on stigma and discrimination, and our stigma and discrimination called SIN. It's wide of Kiara also could impound more on it because she's one of the field officers that collect data from person and to documenting it. And sometimes you're surprised for a small organization or a small community doing this work, and we actually, like, for every month you collect about 30 stigma and discrimination. And it might say 30 for an organization might be limited, but you calculate 30 person who are affected by real stigma or some sort of challenges, multiply it, because these also have rippling effect. A mother who might face domestic violence, she might have a child or 2 or 3 children also being affected by this violence. And so you multiply 30, multiply by 4, and you could imagine the snowball and the effect that we literally try on a daily basis to address some of these challenges.
So, Kiara, let me ask you, 30 is, I don't think it's a small number, I think that's a big number. So is it in interpersonal issues between people, or is it people who are being discriminated when they go to the doctor or to the hospital?
It's generally.
It's generally. Could you give us some more?
Well, they said it's not based upon trans persons, but holistically.
Okay.
And you facing some sort of domestic violence, whether it's verbal, physical, those information well, first of all, you will be interviewed, and it is free and voluntary, I must say, because some person would be scared to give such information, and the information will be documented. There is a login that you normally go into and document the incident, the date, the time, the place, etc. And then after that, it would be a follow-up. Whether you want to have legal advice, whether you want to have a social work to have a one-on-one chat with you, it all depends. But at the end of it, that matter that is being reported, it will be solved.
And it's also confidential. But one of the things is allow us to make claim and demand for better services. We also use it as a redress mechanism.
Yes.
Okay, right. That's what I was going to ask. If the person doesn't want to, I mean, they come to report it, they're seeking help, but they don't want to, say it's a police matter, or it should be a police matter.
So one of the benefits with it is we also, from the scene, we look and analyze our data. And we've been doing some training with state duty bearers to be said. And for instance, like the end of last year, we were able to went into train 2 police school, which in region 2 and region 4. And we could say approximately about close to 100 police was able to be trained. So those are some of the things that when we gather data, we see where the prevalent most effect, especially when it comes to state and duty bearers, and we try to engage and to sensitize and to do some training. However, we want it to ongoing because there's always turnover in public servants.
Right.
Public servants is looking for more, so there's never been enough in training. So we wanted to able to get the support that we can able to continue doing those work.
I'm curious about the reception of the police officers who were being trained. Were they open? Were they respectful? Tell us a little bit more about how that training went.
I just don't want to put on spot, but I think the commissioner, let us start from the commissioner directly.
Okay.
I think he saw the need for it to happen.
Okay.
He gave her the open to get it done. There were some in just a little under him. There was some like ECOP that feel that we shouldn't go to the, who like, don't want to put nobody on spot, but just don't feel that this training should have gone to the training school. However, we passed those orders and able to get it done. And the person who literally there wanted, came from all background and curious as humanly, perhaps people who perhaps maybe a part of the community there but doesn't identify, which is fine, but they find it also interested, whom perhaps is not a part, but they would have known somebody, some relative where they might be struggling, so they find it as good information on how to deal with people when person that's seeking service, because we do it broadly on a human rights, and it just don't speak on our training about just about trans issue. We come from a human rights perspective and vulnerable group. That brings me back to the next point. Like, we remember when the person on the East Bank, and we feel that the police went in there and break down those people home, and we feel that it's too much of force on the police. Myself and a group of persons from Red Thread and some trans persons went in front of the commissioner office, and we picketed because we're saying none of us are free until all of us are free. And whether it's domestic violence, whether it's abuse, whether it's poverty, if we don't tackle all together, we divide it by certain, we are going to consume in our fight. And it's important to put a united voice.
I completely agree. Other than police officers, other duty bearers, have you engaged with healthcare?
Yes, so we've been doing training with healthcare. We have a very good relationship with healthcare. However, because of the fact that some of our program also is about health, and we have a very big part of our program around health, especially HIV counseling and testing and such forth. So we do a lot of training with healthcare. We do with teachers in the past, even though that we wish now to do with teachers, it's a bit difficult. I don't know, for some reason or the other, because we would have since last year engaging the Ministry of Education in order to go and do some training at Sierra College, what we were doing a couple years ago, and we wanted to continue that training. However, for some reason, we're not able to get the training off. We still hope that there is a lot that we can get into our teachers' mind, because we know our teachers are the first respond, and we wanted to do some of those training there. We feel it's a very place to do some of our work.
Right. Because like you said, they're molding the young minds for the future generations. So that sounds like a key place.
Because when we look at what's been playing out, especially in our school, we're not going to talk about homosexuality and all this. But if you look at the children, and a lot of these days, they see on social media every day, children has been bullied, and this cultural change, and this muscular feminine people in body, their rights, and now they protect, and all this masculinity and all intersexuality. And sometimes as teachers, because I personally, when I wanted to share on this program, well, I was a victim of maybe abuse from a teacher in my very early age that have a living impact on me. But all in all, we wanted to know that we know they're human. They have their everyday life going on, and sometimes just a little bit word of advice could make they see things differently.
Right. We know that LGBT youth in particular are very vulnerable to school dropouts and like mental health challenges, not because they're LGBTQ, but because the society is hostile and they don't get that support. So what would you say to the parents? Let's say there's a parent of a child watching who might be trans or queer, lesbian, gay, bisexual, or just non-gender conforming in any particular way. What might you want to say to the parents of somebody like that?
I think it's like to you to walk back and you taking the internal look is that you carrying this child from 9 months. You don't know what the child would become. You don't know. I know that society is a bit advanced in terms that now you can do a test and you can know whether it's a boy or whether a girl, but we don't know the outcome and how the person is going to live their life. And one of the steps is that you felt that pain. And when you think about anything in terms of harming, remember the pain that you felt for that child, and just go right back here in terms that you nurture the child in your womb, you nurture the child until the child become adults. Then it's hard for you to harm the child now. when they become an adult. So go back to some of your early nurturing and
Okay.
allow that nurturing as a mother or a father to protect that child.
Okay, I like that. Kiara,
And if I
what
may
would you
add,
say?
I think also it has to do with understanding
Mm.
and getting the knowledge about okay who trans are, who gay persons are, who lesbian are. At the end of the day, we all human. Because as for me, and I would happy to say this on live stream that a few years back I had a little disadvantage with my parents, and a day like today, both parents love me. They love me like so much dearly. So I'm so happy to know that okay, this is where I was and this is where I'm at now. So it's about understanding. Even if you as a trans person or a gay person, you have a little knowledge, at least you could probably share it with your mother, your father. At some point in time, you will just sit back and think again. I said, okay, this is my son, this is my daughter, this is what he or she wants to be. Just let it be. At the end of the day, I have to love my child, because you won't like for someone to just come and take your child life from you because of you not having this kind of understanding. So it comes back to understanding.
Understanding, great. Very good messages, both of you.
Thank
both
you.
of you. And I'm so glad that you have this loving relationship
Yeah.
with your parents now. Is there anything that you did or said or someone else did or said that changed it, or was it just you kept trying to make them understand? How did
Actually,
they
I
change
just kept
from-
trying to, I would use the word banging it into the ears. Like every time we have a conversation, it would be a neutral conversation where I just try to divert things or change things around. Okay, let's speak about me. Let's speak about my life. This is
Okay.
what I like. This is what I don't like. You know, and
Okay.
probably because the conversation kept being ongoing, to just be like, okay, let it be.
Okay, so you were persistent
Yes.
and you were standing up for yourself.
Yes.
Good, very good, very good. What message would you say to persons who are maybe not quite so bold, or who don't feel, quite so able to stand up for themselves yet? What advice would you give them?
I think, Sherlina, we live in a world that technology has taken us over. There's so many series,
Very true.
there's so many go-to
Right.
these days that you literally can have movies that can bring out stories to your family. Find those stories, find those movie times, start integrating family into sitting over table and having this conversation. Going to your living room, putting on the music. Music sell a powerful story. Even sometimes it could be hatred, but know that the kind of thing that you can bring out of the social media these days is mind-boggling. Like for instance, they have very good role model. I was listening something on Facebook today, and they were saying, even though I don't want it to call it, I don't like to call person who offend me a lot, but they were, a quote was saying, Medea is Donald Trump's best friend. And I'm looking to connect the that, even though Medea's story, a lot of persons might not want it to accept trans, but they would look at Medea. They would look at the role that Medea played. And if you look at sometimes our stories, even though don't get the opportunity to speak our story, sometimes it's playing characters, and larger person benefit from our rich stories.
Okay. So I hear you're talking about like indirect.
Yes. You might not be able to
using-
sell your story, but
Uh-huh.
directly to come out
Okay.
and sell, but there's stories out there that
You
you
can
literally can
find.
start finding and sharing and
Uh-huh.
looking at in
Okay.
family setting.
Okay. Kiara, anything that you would add to what Guyana said? For the
Well-
person who is not so bold yet. What
I would just say let them have faith. Because sometimes persons want to bash or target, and I like to use the complete abbreviation, the LGBTQ, although we focusing upon the trans visibility. However, the LGBTQ persons are just like the others. We are very, very much talented and educated. And today or tomorrow, someone who probably, if you have a child or something that is part of the community, they can make you proud. So it's just about having faith. Everything takes time.
Okay. Okay, it's a good message. It's a very good message. So you mentioned, I mean, going back to the challenges a little bit, you mentioned that HIV awareness raising, testing, and so is one of the things that GTU is involved in. And you mentioned, you know, the name that we don't want to talk about, but have the recent issues, let's say, in our neighbor to the north, the USA, has that affected GTU or the work that GTU does in any way?
Yes, sure, you know what? I don't pay much because it allows me now to ground myself in other things. Like, for instance, I have two major cuts that cut from the US fund. I know when we started GTU, and I can say we started on three main goals, and our three main goals were body, voice, and money. Body mean we had a lot of body support in terms in the work when we started the work, because as a trans community we were fragmented. We were all over the place. We didn't have the support from our family, many of us being thrown out. So we have started as a community in terms to embody each other. We knit together. We support each other. If you had to go to court, if you had any sickness, you wanted a company, you had that support. When we talk about our voice, we always, as a trans community, assumingly people feel that we were too loud. We've been on the roadside a lot in terms of protesting and picketing and raising our voices to a lot of things in terms of society, to call out government in the past, in terms to support other things. And then the last thing would have been money. So one of the things that we were saying, our money, we are not sick, we're not different, able from anybody. Give us the equal opportunity. We've been lobbying government about 12 to 50, about 10 years to get a plot of land. However, we were successful in getting a plot of land now last year, which we have now, GTU now have 10 acres of land, and we feel also is helping us to cultivate that land, that we can able to sustain our community and able to give our wider community work and the opportunity to grow. So even though that the Trump maybe cut the fund and the US cut the fund, we feel that in Guyana, as trans person, we ought to find a place and find an equal opportunity to grow and to able to sustain ourselves and our family and our livelihood. And I felt the passion to get in this land hub. We did some pilot project before. We had a safe space in Region 3, and we were rearing chicken, we were doing farming already, so we've done pilot that. We also pilot a part of our process. GT, you can get achar, you can get pepper sauce, you can get vinegar. So we have a batch of pickles and all these other things. So even though that we look at funding might be lost, we still here and we still able that we opening doors in terms of how do we position the organization for the next 5 years, that even if we have another change in administration and in the next 4 years from now, up there we would now heavily affected on it, because we're looking to get out of driven by donor funding.
I love it. I love it.
And that got back to the fact that I just said, LGBTQ person do have skills.
Right. Right. And we have a lot of resources locally and regionally that we just haven't tapped into. So I like this. So when we're pressured sometimes, that's when we start looking around for the alternatives and realize, oh, we could do this. Oh, we have this skill that we could use to make money. So there's a blessing in disguise.
Sure.
Kind of thing happening, right?
The land was last year, and this year was Trump.
Right.
But and one of the things also, there's a lot of person in the diaspora who all started to reach out to the organization in terms of where they wanted to see us, how they wanted to start supporting the movement back. So there's a greater push to continue to sustain the community.
Lovely. So you're feeling the love, you're feeling the support. Sometimes it takes that too, right? When there's a threat, then you see who your friends are, who your supporters are. They come to back you up. So yeah, we were not fearful. There's a resilience here. There's a strength here that no politician, no president can take away. I like that. So you mentioned the land. You want to say anything else about the land? What's your plans, your vision for the land?
So the land is 10 acres of land. It's located on the highway. I'm not going to give too much of detail, but some of the plan that we do have and we would be looking in. So we do have our strategic plan, and we have a marketing plan. We also have a business plan, and one of the things in the next month or two, we will be going off on a retreat in terms of getting these plan all in sync, that we can then move forward from then how we would develop the land, what kind of benefit we would see coming from those land, how do we move from just moving our produce out to land, but what would we do in terms of it? Would we go into full agro processing? How do we sell it and marketing it? So those are some of the things, the next step that we're going to do. It's not that we just want the land and we get to plant the land, but we also is going to literally get all our document to quack, as you said, into same road.
Right.
In the
So
next few
in the
months.
next in the near future, maybe we'll see some GTU branded items.
Yes, because we already did, like,
Some
myself
more.
and Kiara right here is one of the person that went in and do some of the piloting, some good mango achar and get good review about
Pepper
it,
sauce.
pepper sauce, and we
sauce,
get good
okay,
review
okay.
and such forth.
Nice. Okay, so folks who are watching,
And it's very cheap and affordable.
for folks who are watching, that
And
use
like
the
I
nice
mentioned, they
mango
can check the
achar.
Facebook page. You'll see all of these things are there. If you're interested, contact numbers are there. You can even send a message. There are persons ready to respond. And
Right.
Yeah.
So Guyana Trans United as the Facebook page, right?
yes,
Good. Right. So persons are not just suffering and punishing, but actively working to empower themselves, to create livelihoods, to create opportunities, and to create delicious products for everyone to enjoy. Okay, I like where this is headed. Now, what would you say, going back to messages now, right? So it's Transgender Day of Visibility for the unrepentant homophobes and transphobes. Do we have anything we want to say to them, or are we just gonna ignore them and keep shining our lights?
Sherlina, you know, I learned one thing. We have this limited energy. We have this limited resource in the community. Do we want to waste time
Right.
counteracting what they say? Whatever they say would not change our life, because we know who we are. We don't want you and your narrative to define us, because we can't change your narrative. We can't change you tomorrow. But one of the things is that we wanted to convince the wider society we're not alien. We're not there to harm nobody. We're human being. We are mom. We are sisters. We are brothers. We have our trans brothers. We are fabric of society. We just wanted to live our normal life. We wanted to go on. We wanted to be able to be educated. We wanted to get into mainstream job. We wanted to provide services. And it's just like, even in this old society, from since patriarch, it's always been divided. There's Muslims have their own sort of value, Christian have their own sort of value, the Rastafarian have their own value, the Hindu. We don't want it to be drowned as a community that drowned into religious comebacking. We wanted to use our energy, which would be benefit for us.
Kiara, any
I would
message for the
bypass.
you say same thing that Gulliver said, maybe, right? Yes, energy is limited, and let's put it to do things that serve us.
Yes.
And if persons can't see that we're human just like them, well, something might be wrong with their
Of
eyesight.
course, yes. We just wanted to coexist. We want to go ahead, able to get affordable house to rent. We wanted to able to work. We wanted to able to go back and study. We wanted, just like any other normal, productive Guyanese person, we wanted to contribute to society. We wanted, and I always said we should have a pink economy in terms of we blossom in the world. We, you know, when you go out and you see a flower tree and when you see the nice pink bud on the flower tree, whether it's a mango tree or guava or whatever, but when you see it start a pink bud, you feel nice. We want it to be Guyana as a whole to able to embody all its people, whether Indian, black, religious, whatever dynamic you came from, which part of the spectrum you fall, but to able to coexist. You don't have to believe in everything that you said, and I believe in everything you said, because there are times when we don't even agree with some of the things within our family setting, but let us coexist and allow us to live our full life and our full potential and able to contribute.
One Guyana.
Right. Mutual respect,
Yes.
I think, and is key. Right, and like you said, we don't all agree all the time, even in our families, in our relationships, but we can respectfully disagree, and doesn't mean that you hate the person or they can't continue to live their life. So, in terms of visibility, to wrap up, tomorrow is the International Day of Transgender Visibility. Are you having any activities to commemorate? I mean, we're having this TV program, but are there any activities that persons
Yes,
can?
so we will have activity, but we would not say where the location is because of security reasons. But we do have an activity tomorrow, and one of these activity would start from 4, and what we would be having a session with trans persons to be able to meet with our psychologists and to have a check-in with the psychologist. Every day you've been doing so much. Perhaps you've been burned out as a trans woman, society, family, this, that, too much. So what we have tomorrow is the day to have to meet with the psychologist. And then from that, some of the person who have the small business will be having a mini exhibition. And from the mini exhibition, we'll be winding down the evening with a few drinks and setting our frame of mind and reflecting as a community. Yes.
Okay, so reflecting, relaxing, maybe purchasing some items
Sure.
to help, and okay, so that sounds like a fun time. And again, maybe we'll see some info on the Facebook page.
Yes.
Maybe not, maybe what the items are, and if people
Sure.
want to support and purchase. Okay, so all in all, it sounds like things are, there are still challenges, and there's still people who are, experiencing violence and discrimination, but there is support for those persons. There's redress mechanisms in place. There are organizations. They can come to Guyana Trans United. You guys have an office in
Yes.
Georgetown. People can reach out if there's anybody who's watching that needs community, needs help, needs support. You're not alone. There are persons here who are willing to support you, and there is a community here for you. So I think that's a good message to end on. Is there anything else that Kiara or Mika would want to say?
So I encourage person, and this is not just for the trans community, but for any vulnerable group, reach out. There's always a voice out there. I know sometimes when you're going through your trouble, you can feel that you're in the wilderness, but sometimes just reach out. Maybe it's just a phone call. 674-8741 is my contact number, and you just reach out. I might not be the one directly, but I could be able to maybe lay you onto somebody to deal with your particular situation. Just reach out. Don't feel alone. Always reach out. There's always somebody at the end of the line that can comfort you in some way or the other.
Kiara?
Yes, and just to add to what Gulliver just mentioned, you can also reach out to me on 633-3885, and I can play a great role within your, probably if you have been abused, I can assist you with a lot of things as the Stigma and Discrimination Officer for Region 3 and Parish Region 4. So feel free, and please know that whatever you discuss with me or any one of my colleagues, it will be confidential. Yeah.
Right. Confidentiality is
Yes.
very important. Okay, well, if there's nothing else, that I feel like we've covered quite a lot in this hour. Um, so we will wrap up now and just wish you a wonderful day tomorrow as you celebrate Transgender Day of Visibility. And again, reminding people to check the Guyana Trans United Facebook page for all the news and updates and information about ways that you can get involved and support this community.
Thank you.
Thank you.